Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third talk of the day in the hyper casual track. I know for this talk, we all know about once you get like the number of hits, there's always a question in the minds of developer like should I share why am I sharing my revenue with a publisher, right? Should I just take the risk and take all the rewards that I can? And it also happens when you're just starting out. And I think it's only natural. And throughout my career as a publisher, I have always heard this, not just in hyper casual but also in other forms of it, because from outside the whole marketing and UA seems something that's easy, right? And then you're like, okay, maybe I can hire one or two guys from a UA and marketing team and I can take all the revenue. And the thing is, is it there are like many facets to this question, right? It's not about like the reward, but like, are you able to take that many risks? Is that your focus? So for this address this topic today, we have Umut here, who is the co-founder and CEO of Play Studio in Turkey. It's growing up as one of the largest fully remote hyper-casual game studio in the world. And they also launched, along with Rolik, Ophone, which claims to be the biggest mobile game development accelerator in the world. So Umut on a daily basis interacts with a lot of young studios, mentors them, guides them, and I could not think of anyone better than Umut to answer this question. So over to you, Umut, for the topic: publishing or self-publishing versus working with a publisher.
Thank you, Balaji, for your nice words, and I'm gonna try my best to address some of the question marks. So, hello everybody. My name is Umut. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Play Studio. What I want to talk about today is, basically the differences or the dichotomy of publishing yourself or publishing with a publisher. So let me start with the most important question, and that is why. Like, why do we publish a game with a publishing studio or a publisher, or why do we do it ourselves? So I think it was Simon Sinek who started this trend, start with why, in the entrepreneurial circles, and I think it's very important. One thing to consider about every single decision is, I think, the main reason, the core idea of why you're doing it, and I think it's worth discussing why we need to consider publishing our games with a publisher, or without anybody, just ourselves. And to answer that question, we gotta ask ourselves, like, why are we doing this? I know it sounds like a silly question, but it starts with this: why are we doing this? If you're in it, for example, for short-term gain, it leads you to another destination. Or if this is a stepping stone for your career, personal growth, it directs you to a certain destination. But if you're in this for the long game, if you're in this for achieving your goals and creating the best game studio in the world, that leads you somewhere else. And there's no right or wrong about any of these answers. But you gotta ask yourself why I'm doing it. Most people are doing it surprisingly just because this is what everybody else is doing, and I don't think that's the answer you should have. The answer you should have should be more deep, or coming from a deeper place. Like, why am I doing it? For me, for example, why am I doing this is because I want to create an incredible ecosystem that generates games that are played by like hundreds of millions of people around the globe, developed, designed, and produced by like all kinds of people from all kinds of communities around the globe. So that's the reason. So it has a social impact aspect as well as financial. Of course, I'm here for the money as well. I like money. There's nothing wrong about it, but for me, it's not the only outcome. And to be honest with you, money follows what I really have. in my perspective. It's just an artifact that basically, you know, almost generates itself when you achieve your goals, which is basically creating games that will be played by millions of people, produced by amazing talents from all over the globe. And that's why I'm here. Now, you should ask this question to yourself, and the answer may surprise you. Ask deeper. Why? Ask why like 5 times. Like, why are you doing this? Because of blah blah blah. Why is that so? Because blah blah. And the core is how you're going to shape the rest of the strategy. So, having said all these, this brings you something very tangible, the main goal. I already told you mine. Like, my goal with my co-founders, with my teammates, my goal is to create an amazing ecosystem. And I use that word on purpose because an ecosystem is self-sufficient. It develops itself. It improves itself. It sustains itself. Therefore, I'm creating a platform, or I'm creating a habitat where people can learn from each other, hence utilizing peer instruction, or people help each other get better, and also produces games in the most efficient way, etc., etc. So my goal is that, and therefore it's almost obvious, very like it almost brings itself above the water, the strategy, because in order to achieve such an ambitious goal, I have to have a strategic partner. That's the answer I came up with, because I had to touch a lot of people in a very short amount of time, in a very efficient way. And the only way to do that is to create the infrastructure. And that's not as easy as it sounds. So we started an accelerator with our publisher, Rolik, for example. And we also developed an online workspace to enable remote work for every single employee and off-on members, the accelerators teams, right? So that, almost presented itself as a milestone as soon as I get the main goal right. So your main goal is what? Is it to become rich? And that's an okay answer, but I don't think it's the answer you really have. The deeper answer is that you may want to, create the best RPG game in the world. That's an awesome answer. Or you may want to just, make games all day and that's it. That's all you want. You don't care about anything else. And that's also cool. Or maybe you may want to create something like, I don't know, GTA or Football Manager, whatever you floats your boat. That's your thing. But you have to you have to decide early on. Therefore, you have milestones in front of you. If your answer, for example, is to make money as soon as possible so that you can buy a car, again, these are all metrics of success, not the success itself, in my opinion. But if that is that, you may very well have a relationship with a publisher and start producing hyper casual games for that publisher and get a certain amount of the in exchange of the prototypes you produce, and start getting something rolling. And you can even make some little money, and maybe you can have some of the things you want. However, if your goal is to create the best X game studio in the world, and that's not going to happen in a year or two, then you should ask all the questions. How am I going to finance this? What is the first step? If I'm building the best video game company of 10 years, like 2031, okay, what is that company's founder doing in 2021? If the answer is I'm gonna start self-publishing, if that's what you need to do, then you have to find ways to fund that. And when I say funding, I'm not only talking about money. I'm talking about time. I'm talking about motivation. I'm talking about uh, energy. I'm talking about insight. I'm talking about data. Like you will need all this stuff in order to accomplish your ambitious goals. Or, for example, you can go this route, and that's also right. In other words, there's no right or wrong. You may, tell yourself, "Hey, I want to create this amazing, like mid-core game company, and like 10 years from now, I'm going to be doing everything. I'm going to be doing games for Xbox, VR, AR, PlayStation, Steam, mobile, everything like cross-platform, and even like, HTML5 games that work for like Zoom or Discord and all that. Okay. But that's 10 years from now. Maybe 5 years from now, half of that product line is going to be active. And 2 years from now, maybe two of those products are going to be, active. And maybe 1 year from now, it's just going to be one, and that's going to be hyper casual. And maybe in order to accelerate that process, you need a publisher. So it all depends on where you want to go. And we're going to talk about pros and cons in a minute about, the technicalities of working with a publisher. But I think you have to get the main core point right at the very beginning. So this is why you need to think about why you're doing it, and then afterwards you have to maintain a accessible goal. And that goal, by the way, needs to be very measurable. It needs to be tangible so that you will know when the time comes, you will know if you succeed or not. Or you'll say like, hey, I accomplished like 60% of what I wanted to accomplish. That's okay. But you have to have metrics, KPIs in order to measure it. That's very important. So in other words, the main goal shouldn't be, I'm going to be the best company in the world. That's very subjective. It should be something as tangible as this. I'm going to have 5,000 people working for me, creating at least 10 AAA games, reaching like 500 million people, something like that. And my daily active users is blah, blah, blah. So I write down as many details as possible on a piece of paper and see if it's feasible. If you can see that as a progressive line, then you can do it. And I'm not telling you that you will have to design everything in advance as like a business plan. I don't believe in business plans, but I believe in planning. Planning is everything. So you have to make sure that you realize all these ideas in your mind by putting them on paper or a Google sheet or whatever. But you have to start planning things and start seeing them from a feasibility perspective, so that you can start accomplishing some of it, ignoring some of it, killing some of it, and that gets you started. And when you get the ball rolling, the rest just basically comes as a law of nature. That's it, at least what I believe. Now, the differentiating factors, unique values, in other words, about self-publishing and publishing with a publisher is very, very different. For example, the differentiating factor, the unique value about self-publishing, the most important one is that you get to keep all the profit, 100% of it. Again, 0% of 100 profit, 100% is zero. However, if you get to publish a game, and if you get to monetize it, and if you get to do it well so that you make a lot of money, then you're good. You did a good job. Now you own every single penny of it. And also, it's not just about money. You own the intellectual property, and you own your growth team, know-how, insight, data, all of the above. So resources are all the resources you gain in this period are yours, and that's cool. So that's one of the most important things about publishing with a publisher. On the other side, when you publish with a publisher, you get to grow really fast because they are sharing their resources, their insight, their data, their money, their time, their motivation, and you benefit from it. And you now go, 200 miles an hour instead of 20. Why? Because you're supported by a team of professionals whose job is basically just to help you release a game. And this accelerates you. Now, there's a give and take. If you choose one route, doesn't mean that the other one is wrong. However, if you want to grow fast, working with a publisher is definitely, a very good advantage, very, very good competitive advantage over someone with self-publishing ideology. Because now you learn as you get funded, and that's really rare in any industry. Think about it. Like you get to learn things, you get to improve your skill sets, you get to get experienced, and the guy who is doing that is trying to get you faster more than you do, because at the end you're gonna share the profit, and it's all free. It's not free, of course, because you're sharing your profits, but that's from the future. You're sharing future profits. You have no credibility before that, or maybe a little, right? But now, if you convince someone, it's basically they are betting on you that you're gonna create something so that you can share in the future. Now they are sharing resources, and that's the main difference between working with a publisher and working, just a lone wolf style self-publishing. So there are more unique values. When you self-publish, you have to, you know, you have to have all the insight in you. In other words, like the scope is now way bigger than just game development. It's not just CPI retention, and playtime, game metrics, or the trends, or concepts, themes. All these things are just about game development. You now have to deal with user acquisition, monetization, marketing, distribution, data. Like there are all kinds of different things that you have to deal with, and you have to have data scientists. You have to have really talented people, growth managers, game managers, and you have to, you have to know how to use Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, all these different channels to generate users, and they're that they have different characteristics. They bring different retention, etc. And also there are like legal issues you have to deal with. It's not a good or bad thing. It's what it is. You have to build a team who can deal with all of this stuff. So you're a little defocused here, but at the same time, you're growing a big team. So it's a give and take. If you get it, like if you accomplish what you want to do, and if you have all the resources and if it's right fit, and if you believe yourself, hey, I can do marketing and also development, that's great. Marketing and sales are the hardest things in the world. Like it's not easy. It's the opposite of easy. I'm not saying that development is easy. As a game developer, I can say that wholeheartedly. Like, it's not easy. But, like marketing is very, very, very competitive and sophisticated. On the other side, when you deal with just game development, you have a better focus. You have a relatively smaller team, just focused on the main aspects of game: ideation, creativity, and development. So these are all your assets that you just nurture and improve, enhance every day. This is another differentiating factor. I'm gonna answer questions after the presentation, so don't think that I'm ignoring your questions, guys. keep asking. We're gonna answer them after the presentation. Now, how do we define pros and cons, ups and downs? Actually, I was gonna write pros and cons, but I wrote ups and cons. I just see it. Anyways, it doesn't matter. It means that what are the advantages and disadvantages, right? So, if you release a game by yourself, you have to do everything by yourself. So that's a disadvantage. Why? Because now you have to deal with cash flow, which is accounting. And now you have to deal with monetization, which is a very technical thing. And it has nothing to do with game development because it's a creative business. Now, that's a big disadvantage if you ask me. And this is one of the reasons why I didn't want to do it. But on the other side, the biggest advantage of self-publishing is that, if you're successful, you get to keep it right. So it's a bigger future income, but it's also a bigger current risk because you're now risking your energy on developing a very successful teams, fighting on different wars. Game development is one thing and selling that game is another. So these are two different wars going on at the same time. So you have different parts of the war, and it's like it's like a monster with two heads. This is at least how I pictured it in my head. On the other side, if you if you work with a publisher, now you're focused, you just deal with your thing, and they help you improve in terms of marketing inside as well. And that's the beauty, I believe, of working with a publisher because the things I learned from Rolik, for example, are worth like a good number of PhDs, if you ask me. I learned way more than I did in college, for example, and I spent like 11 years in college. I even taught like 7,000 hours, at university level. And I seriously think that publishers, a good publisher, let me put it that way, is way more educational than any school I know. And maybe the schools I know are not as good. But seriously, like you learn a lot in a very short amount of time because you have a mutually beneficial goal, and that is to release a game, and they want to do it fast because otherwise they're going to burn their money and they don't want it. And that's the beauty of the publishing deal. Now there are many other advantages and disadvantages, and let me say a few more. For example, an advantage of working with a publisher is that when you need to grow, let's say as a team, or when you need to produce games in other genre, now you have someone to talk about. It's like an investor right next to you, but you don't have to pitch from scratch. You don't have to convince them because they're already convinced and they're working with you. So the expansion happens really fast. Growth happens really fast if you have the right partner, because in a growing business, everybody wants to have as many resources as possible, to cover as many land as possible, stuff like that, right? So you already have a partner in crime that you want to double down on growth. However, if you're self-publishing, you have to deal with things like, okay, we tested this game, didn't work. We tried soft launch, but the metrics are not as good. So we have to raise money in order to either, go to another route and test another game, or maybe do a different version of this one and just give it a try. So this kind of things. And, when you're talking about soft launches, I'm not talking about like $5,000, $10,000. You have to have millions of dollars sometimes, in order to just make the game run. And, the paybacks, depending on the genre, break-even point is sometimes years later. So like you have to burn a lot of cash and you have to fund it somehow. So what are you gonna do? You can talk to investors, you're gonna convince people, and you're gonna start from scratch, and you have a studio waiting. So that's another ups and cons, or disadvantage, advantage dichotomy. I mean, I can talk about it more, but let me accelerate, let me speed up because I want to talk about other things. The insight you gain as a self publisher is basically the things you teach yourself. And that's very different than learning from someone else. Everybody knows that. If you go to a school, if you study, for an exam or something with someone, you always do better because you learn something, you teach that guy something, she learns something, and she teaches you that thing, and you just get a better grade instead of like instead of that, if you just study yourself, you just have one perspective, one angle, and that's it. And you can easily, create wrong methodologies and believe they're good and just keep moving towards that destination, even though they're not bringing you anything good. That's very possible. If you play an instrument, if you learn by yourself how to play drums, you can learn how to hold the stick in the wrong way, and that can haunt you for like years. And once you do it wrong, it's really hard to fix it. However, when you start right, it could be very beneficial, especially if you have a professional right next to you that shares what they learn from hundreds of other studios with you. That's very, very beneficial, in my opinion. However, the other side of that coin is that once you gain very important, valuable insight, let's say you discover something, like there's a gap between hyper casual and blah, 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 and you just hit the note, and that just, created really, really good reactions. Now you own that insight, and only you. Again, bigger income later, but the probability of having this is not as high as you might think. But these are all give and takes. Like you have to make your mind, and make decisions based on the main goal you have, as I said. Another angle for working with a publisher versus self-publishing angle is the sustainability aspect. In other words, how long can you keep doing this? In any startup, you should have at least 1.5 year of runway in front of you so that you can make clear decisions about, what to invest in, where to go, who to hire, etc., etc. And that 1.5 years are not always feasible. Sometimes you have to deal with like a month or two, and that becomes really, really stressful. When you work with a publisher, you are better off. Actually, when you work with a publisher, sustainability already happens as long as you keep being motivated and going the right direction. In other words, if you do your part and work your ass off, you're gonna have a sustainable business, and publishers are gonna back you one way or another, especially if it's an expanding genre such as hyper casual, right? On the other side, I already mentioned like cash flow, etc. But let's say that you want to hire someone in order to get your food in a certain platform or genre. And in order to do that, you have to have some resources because you're going to build a team, for example, below her, and you're going to invest in it by like buying equipment and paying people, so for so on. Now you have to find a way to fund that in order to keep it sustainable. Otherwise, you will need to like fire people or close it and do something else, or another solution. But it's not going to be sustainable. So when you're self publishing, sustainability is going to be over your head at all times, like as a sword. I forgot the name, something sword, or someone's sword, but Damocles sword, I believe. Um, and it's not a good position to be in, and believe me, I know it. Like if you don't have the runway, if things are moving, if the thing you're driving has a lot of moving parts and everything is changing at all times, and you want to keep your head above water, and meanwhile you're doing something creative, that's really hard. So um, you have to think about that as well when you make that decision. Of course, freedom is very important, and all you got to do is choosing the right way to gain what kind of freedom you want. If you choose to publish your game, you have the freedom to try, your way of developing and selling games, and you can do whatever you want, except investors, maybe, so you have the freedom to convince the investors, and maybe you have your own money to burn, and that's a good freedom. You're free, you can do whatever you want. However, if you choose to work with a publisher, you know you give away some of that freedom, but in exchange, you gain the freedom of growing in a specific track in a sustainable way. So that's not happening in the other, version of the story. Because if you choose to go self-publishing route, yes, you're free to choose which way to go, but when you get in that way, you're now stuck, and you have to be successful. And in order to keep it sustainable, you have to make sure that you do certain things, which includes showing your investors some KPIs. So, having said that, I want to conclude with my last verse, which is, it depends, guys. Like whatever you want from your company, whatever you want from the future, literally defines your main goal, and therefore the choice you're about to make. I highly recommend you to work with a publisher if you want to accomplish something in a shorter amount of time and use that thing to do greater things. In other words, use this time with a publisher um, as a stepping stone, and then move to bigger things. And sometimes, like in our example, you don't have to change ways as well. You can keep working with a publisher, but find innovative ways, such as creating an accelerator with them, to share the insight and data and motivation, etc. On the other side, if you want to go big, and if you want to accomplish your huge ambitions, now you can try it, and maybe you have a really good aura, or you're a veteran with a lot of experience and network and authority, and maybe that's why you should do self-publishing. So it all depends what you want to accomplish. Thank you guys for listening to me. Balaji, if there are questions, I would be more than happy to answer. Well, let's get started.
Hey, Mo, thanks again. So much knowledge and all backed with like data and context and logic. I'm pretty sure
My pleasure.
a lot of questions. Yeah, let's dive into to us, and I will highlight some questions for you to answer. The first one is, how long do publishing contracts last? Would I be able to negotiate buying back my IP after X number of years? You want to take that?
Yeah, so it depends. That's the short answer. The long answer is, for example, hyper casual genre, it may be a year or half a year. The longer it is typically this more serious your relationship with the publisher, and there are also exclusive contracts and non-exclusive contracts. So um, I assume this question is about the exclusive contracts. So typically a year, and I think that's a um, healthy amount of time. It's fair for both sides because 1 year is you know a long enough time for each party to dedicate some sort, like some amount of specific amount of time, energy, and money, and but it's also short enough that if it doesn't work for some reason, you can move another direction. And I recommend 1 year deals because you can see what works and what doesn't work, and at least after 1 year you can consider your options.
Yeah, and just to add to that, as a publisher, I would say like it's totally possible, and we do that at Sunday as well. That you don't have to really give your IP, you give exclusive marketing or publishing rights for a year. So basically, what that means, like for that IP or that game, the publisher gets exclusivity to work on that, and then it's mutually extendable, right? And then if the publisher is doing a good job, why would you want to like disrupt that anyways? And same for the publisher. If it doesn't work out, why would they want to invest in this anyways, right? So it's a win-win scenario.
Yeah.
Um,
And at the accelerator we run with Rolik often, we are signing 1 year contracts,
yeah,
which can be extended for one more year. So there are different types, but I think 1 year is good.
yeah, I think so too. Does it make sense to do both together? We are a budding game studio with our own IP, but we are also keen on breaking into the hyper casual market. This is a good. I think probably you have a lot of studios who are like doing a lot of
Yeah.
things inside, right?
There's no right or wrong answer for this question. It's a hard question. Let me put it that way. My instinct is that it's not right. I think you should be focused on one thing at a specific time, especially early on. Now, for example, as T Play Studio, we can do multiple projects at a time, but it took some time, right? After launching 4 games, we gained the insight, know-how, etc., to do that kind of stuff. But at the early days, we were just focusing on one thing, and for us, it was hyper casual games, and we were doing it at the right time, at the right place, and we got lucky. So I'm not saying you should only be doing hyper casual. What I'm saying is you should be at least at the very beginning, you should be focusing on one thing, and that's my take on it.
Right. The next question would be okay, I have a prototype ready for hyper casual. How to approach a publisher, get funded, how to market it, and what type of contract should I offer? If you're going for a publisher, don't market it, but I think you can answer the rest of the questions.
Yeah. So you should literally email them. And believe me, they're reading every email. If you don't get a response, that's mostly because they didn't like your game that much. And that's the hard truth about it. They have to check their emails because their job is basically scouting new games. So they're doing it. And I think the best way is literally just sending them emails and get feedback. And it's okay to be a little aggressive about it as well. Like you can say, like, "Hey, last week I emailed you. What do you think? It would be nice to hear a few words if you have, as criticism or something." I'm not saying that you're going to get any response, by the way, but it's worth it, right? Now, about the contracts, I think there's an idiom. I think it was something like this: you're putting the cart in front of the horse here. It's the wrong way to think about it. Like if you have something valuable, the contracts, the deals, everything is gonna follow it. The important thing here is the question here you should ask is how am I gonna make a game that's gonna attract the publishers? And that's not easy. If I were you, this is what I would do. I would try to create something innovative in a very small space, meaning that I wouldn't do the like fifth clone of Queen Bee or something like that, but I would try to come up with a new or innovative mechanics or some art or some, whatever level progress idea, whatever, that would impress the publisher so that you're unique and they're going to think, oh, these guys can do something unique. I think that's the most important part of creating a differentiating factor, because what you're doing at the end of the day is a product and it should have a differentiating factor. If it's the same game, like if it's like the hair challenge, it's hair challenge but with different theme, it's not original. And they already played that game, hundreds of millions of people. You should come up with something that can attract hundreds of millions of people, or at least show the publisher that you're trying hard. So I think that's the right question. And thanks for the question. I hope I answered it.
Yeah, and just to add to what Umar said, as a publisher, receive, I don't know, like hundreds of emails every day, like thousands of games every month, right? And for some reason, a lot of people do think hyper casual is about cloning successful games and doing it just with a different theme. And even if you're innovative, and it's a good point that Umar made, like if you're innovative, you stand out from the crowd, right? You are like 1% in this 99. And even if I don't believe in your mechanic, I want to talk to you, and not just me, any publisher will want to talk to you because they see the potential of thinking outside the box, right? So yeah, definitely a very good pro tip over there. How do I decide which publisher is best for me? That's a good one as well.
You just write the names on a piece of paper and then just throw it in the closer. Now, I think it depends. We chose Rolex because they were growing really fast. They were in Istanbul. And I like the guys. Like I met them like personally and we just clicked. So these are the reasons, and we believed them. Like they were growing really fast and we thought, okay, if we work with these guys, we're going to grow fast as well. We believed it and it became a reality because we grew fast with them. So it worked for us. For you, you have to make sure that you understand why you're doing it, as I explained in detail, and then ask this question to yourself: are these the guys who can take me from 0 to 1? If the answer is yes, work with them. If the answer is no, don't work with them. It's easy and hard at the same time. It's very easy.
Yeah, it
but
has
it's
to
very
work both
hard.
ways, right? I mean, the publisher believes in you and the studio believes in the publisher, and the other there is a joint story, right? Should be win-win. Totally right on point. From maybe this also from your experience, you can answer this better. At what stage do you approach a publisher? Just after writing a GDD, or making a MVP, or after publishing an app store and gain some traction? Definitely not the last, but what would you choose for the first ones?
Yeah, if I get a GDD or something, like especially for mobile games, and it's just that, I'm not reading it because it's not the idea, it's the execution that makes the difference. Ideas are free, execution is not, and people are after execution. And the more I work, the more I understand this in this industry, that the more metrics you have that you can prove your success or potential success, the better it is. So if you ask me, if you release games by yourself, like 10 games on Play Store, I don't care. I mean, App Store is better, but you just put it there. That's something I can see. That's tangible. I know that now you know how to use Xcode, like worst case scenario, right? You know how to publish a game. You know how to deal with App Store, etc. But if you have metrics from a publisher, that's even better for me. For example, hey, I tested this game with this company, and they didn't provide the coaching I needed, and we didn't improve the game. But I got this retention, I got this CPI. What do you think? That is very intriguing for me. Like I'm like, okay, let's talk. So the faster you get metrics, the better it is. So I think my answer is like, you don't have to publish it, by the way, but definitely produce games before talking to a
Make
publisher.
some prototypes, at least with two, three
Yeah,
levels, right?
yeah. Like test flight, you can send test flights or APKs or whatever, doesn't matter, but send like games to the publisher so that they can play, not videos.
Okay, I think we could take one last question, and probably this also
Sure.
you get from a lot of your young studios. So hyper casual industry grows older, more mature. Most studios have hits, and I've seen publishers prefer that the studios who have hits over others who don't have hits. So doesn't it make it tough for new studios to sustain?
I don't agree with the statement. I
Yeah.
think this is this is a story. The guy who asked the question believes. It doesn't mean that it's real. I'm sorry, I'm being blunt here. So, in order to help you guys, I want to be honest as possible, right? So it's the opposite, maybe. Like I really like young guys who have a lot of motivation instead of dealing with people who have uh, like very strong opinions about things. So I prefer to work with people who are like 20-year-old, like 5 people who just got together, made a few games. That's my like ultimate goal to work with this kind of guys. On the other side, if I have like 5 guys with like 20 years industry experience each, that's something like that's not very attractive for me. It's different for every publisher. My point is this: we don't discriminate against new guys. If one thing, we do positive discrimination. Just wanted to put it out
Answer.
there.
And I think as the hyper casual industry is maturing, it's about volume. You need more
Yeah.
studios, you need fresh ideas. So it's never going to be that it only stays with a small cohort, right? So with that, I would like to actually end this session. Thank you everyone for being so engaging and asking the question. And thanks so much for your patience and all your knowledgeable insights. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and I'm looking forward to having your applications to Ophon as well. Some of you
Oh yeah,
would be
please
very interested. Yeah,
please check it out.
Ophon.js. All right, guys.
Alrighty. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.